This is wisdom eternal. This is life. This is everything we need to live well. And we want to try and drill into it week in, week out. So what we've done is we're going to invite Lesley to take this on and lead us through.
So I'd love to invite Alison and Alex and Kwame to come up, and we're going to do some interviews. So hopefully, yes, let's give them a clap. Come and, I'm not sure I need the loud microphone, but there we go. Come and have a seat. And hopefully, we are facing the front, so hopefully you guys on the edge don't feel excluded. You're very welcome, and you're very included in this, but we're just, the way that the seats are, we're sitting this way. So we are doing a series on Ephesians, and we are looking at how we can be one church, holy and wise. And so today we are focusing on what does it look like to be holy and wise in our workplace. So I'm titling this one, Vocation, 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 because the Lord is breaking through in our workplaces and where we're called to. And we're looking at Ephesians 6, verse 5 to 9. And the key themes in this passage are imitating God in our employment, not just doing evangelism or loving our neighbours explicitly, but also helping to sustain creation, change values and structures, and bringing kingdom excellence through the actual work we're doing, because God will reward us when we do this. And what better way but to get that from people who are doing this in their workplace. And so I'm going to limit the time that I'm talking and squeeze as much kingdom goodness out of these guys as we can with their wisdom and their lived experience of that. So, first of all, we'll do Kwame first. Kwame and Alex. Ephesians 6 tells us that when we're working in our workplace, we should be working as if for the Lord and not for people. So we'd love to briefly know, what is your job and what does it look like for you to work in your workplace as if for the Lord? So Kwame, you go first. Just unmute you, otherwise it would be not so good.
I'm an aircraft engineer, senior aircraft engineer, and I've been doing it for about 25 years now.
That is amazing.
And literally what I tend to do is, my role is looking after the whole fleet, from delivery to exit, so working flight operations. So we're responsible.
Is that a whole fleet of aircraft?
A whole fleet of aircrafts.
That's amazing.
40 plus aircrafts. Our responsibility is safety and compliance, and literally we plan from beginning to end all the maintenance events for our fleet to make sure they're all safe to fly, and we plan all our hangar events or overseas events for the aircrafts. So there is a lot of pressure in the work itself, but it's rewarding. I enjoy it. And the question regarding, obviously, how do you reflect that in the workplace in terms of the work you do? You give it 110%. I've been there 25 years, so obviously quite loyal. Enjoy what I do.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it could sound like you could have your faith at church because your job doesn't necessarily translate to kingdom work necessarily, but you work at it 110%, you said, not just 100%, 110, because that is like working for the Lord.
Yes, and also,
work.
Yes, your employer, as an employee, you want to make sure you're honest with what you do, and he sees your loyalty, and you give it your all.
That's amazing. It's amazing to hear how you work for the Lord in that. That's wonderful. Fantastic. So I'm going to pass to Alex next, and same question to you, Alex. Just briefly tell us who you are, what you do, and how is your workplace, how do you work as if working for the Lord?
Sure. So I am an economist for the Office of Water. Super exciting. We basically, we're government kind of, we regulate the water companies who supply your water. So we try and make sure it's not too expensive, that's a fair price. And I work on the consenting of large projects. So if a water company wants to build a reservoir, they say it's going to cost this amount of money, and customers pay for that, which makes sense because they're the ones who benefit from it. But we probe that number. We say it doesn't really cost that much. Could you do it this way? Could you do it that way? is this reservoir going to burst? And so we're just kind of the middleman between water companies and customers. That's what I do. In terms of how I work for Lord and that, I'll give my top 3. I love this topic. I love this topic a lot. The first is just the satisfaction for my work. I think I used to be quite extrinsically motivated to the point where if I did a bad job, but someone said, "Good job, Alex," like I'd sleep like a baby because I'd be like, "Oh, someone said good job." And on the flip side, if someone gave me some, not even negative, just like constructive feedback, I'd just stew on that all day. I'd be like, "Oh, I'm the worst," like, "Oh." But I've learned to like get to the end of the day. I've worked my hours. I've given my energy. I've repented of when I've been unproductive, and like that's great. That's all God wants. The second is the standard I work to. So there's a lot of like home working in my job, a lot of hybrid working, and even when I'm in the office, there's not someone like watching me the whole time. But like this passage literally says work for the Lord, and that's just such freedom that we're not working to get human recognition, and that God sees everything we do at home. Every time we click on YouTube instead of answering an email, he sees that, which can sound scary, but it's good news because it all counts in his kingdom. So that, and then the submission thing as well, is super important. You spoke about like respecting your bosses. In small group this week, we had a really good definition of submission. We said it's putting yourself under someone else's authority, arranging yourself under the authority of someone else. And that's the way I view it. And we are under Christ's authority, and we arrange ourselves under his, and that we're happy about that because we rate his authority and we think it's great. And it gets harder we spoke about marriage last week, or at work, when we arrange ourselves under someone's authority who we trust slightly less. So that doesn't mean I chuck my brain out the window. I've had like good bosses, bad bosses, but all the same, I'm not above their calls. I'm not above what they tell me to do, as long as it's not immoral. So yeah, submission, super important as well, I think.
Great, and we're going to ask a little bit more about that in a bit as well. Kwame, was there anything else you wanted to add on to that?
Yeah, Alex is quite important because you submit to your bosses, you're given instruction, and you follow it to the letter, and you don't try and sort of undermine what you're given. So yeah, it's submission and with respect as well.
That's great. Thank you, you two. And not forgetting, of course, Alison. We're going to pass on to Alison. Alison, if you'd just like to briefly tell us about your employment, and then as you've started a business, which is slightly different, what is it like for you to work at your job as if you're working for the Lord?
Sure. Okay. Firstly, I just think it's quite good that me and Lesley are sitting here together, because you can now tell that we're two different people. And also, Hannah was up here earlier.
Hannah needs to stand up as well.
Because pretty much we seem to be interchangeable in people's minds. We always get called this Hannah. Anyway, so I'm Alison. I've been an employee for 20 years of my life. Worked mainly in creative industries. I did also work for a church, the kids pastor, for a while. But for the last 10 years, I've been self-employed. Firstly, or mostly as a franchisee. So I was working for another company, but running their art courses. But now, 3 months ago, I started my own art class business. It's called Art for Life. So I now run art courses and workshops for adults in and around Croydon and Bromley, and I love it. I also do film production. That's my other kind of passion. Although I've been running a film production company for 10 years, I've not done as much as I'd like to. It's something I'd like to do more of. Okay, I've got notes. And my answer is threefold.
Excellent.
So, I'm going to tell you the three things briefly. I'm in teacher mode now, just so that you know where I'm going. So firstly, for me, work is worship, and that touches a bit on what Leon was saying last week. Secondly, at work, I try to be an ambassador for Jesus. And thirdly, God is the head of my business. So I'll talk a little bit more about each of those. So firstly, with work as worship, I was thinking about the bit in Romans that says, offer yourselves as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. So I try to do that in my work. And as worship, you're giving of yourself to your customers and your colleagues as well, but also giving to God by using your gifts, the gifts and talents that he's given you. You're giving those things to God in a kind of worshipful way. Worship is like bowing down and submitting to him, acknowledging that he's the boss, really, but also looking up and thanking him, acknowledging that everything that's, that we have is from him. So that's work as worship. And then in terms of being an ambassador for Jesus, I am a rubbish evangelist. So I do not go to work with my Jesus T-shirt on, and I don't bring Jesus into every conversation. I'd like to be that person, but I'm just not. I'm not a very good sort of salesperson. But I do feel that as thinking of it as an ambassador for Jesus, it means that I can run my business on Christian principles, biblical principles, so honesty and integrity, forgiveness, kindness, all of those things are really important, and I hope kind of run through everything we do in the art classes and in my filmmaking. And also just trying to be salt and light, another sort of thing from the Bible, just to kind of make sure that I'm sort of flavouring things with a kind of God emphasis, but subtly, I suppose, and being a light, just hopefully shining out from him. In fact, one of my students recently said to me, "Oh, do you know what? There's something different about you. You're kind of oddly happy all the time." And of course, a great evangelist would say, "Yes, that's the light of Jesus shining from me." And of course, I just felt really encouraged, so that was nice. But that kind of thing. The name of my business is Art for Life. And I really feel like, art is something that brings people life. I can bang on for hours about this, but, I really feel like we are all created in God's image. He's the ultimate and OG creator. And so actually everybody is born and has within them creative talents. I mean, some people might use them, a surgeon might be creative in the way in which they sort of approach repairing a kidney, or whatever. But, I do feel like my job is to kind of bring out the artistic skills in people, but that all comes from God. God is the creator. So that's really cool. What else? I try to be an encourager. People are so kind of down on themselves, but as soon as they start putting paint on a canvas or start drawing something, most people, I find, their immediate reaction is, "Oh, that's rubbish." And they compare themselves to others, and and they forget that actually, you can just get joy from scribbling on a piece of paper. And I try and sort of help people with that and bring that out in people in the art classes. Showing God's love to my students. I know that sounds very simple, but some of them, a lot of my students, because it's daytime art classes in general, a lot of them are retired people. Some of them are really lonely, and they just need a friend. They just need someone to talk to. So, we do a quick demo at the start of the class, but I spend the rest of the class going around, not just helping them with their art, but just showing them love, really. Hopefully that helps them. And also, finally, just to be generous as well, with anything that God blesses me with. On our website, we've got a little section that says paying it forward, just to kind of explain to people that, we're not just here to take your money, we actually want to give something back. So, for example, our summer exhibition is going to have 20% of the sales of any artwork will go to a charity, and just, giving as much as we can. And also using art as outreach. That's a big sort of vision of mine. My company has actually only been running since September, so up till now I've been sort of under the rules, I suppose, of the franchise, but I'm now completely free to make all the decisions myself and with my team. So that's wonderful. We can start to really sort of explore those things that God might want us to be doing. Okay, and the third one. Sorry, I'm really hogging it, aren't I?
That's fine. Go for it.
Sorry, I ramble a lot. Anyway, I've left out about 5 things. You're really lucky, actually. Yeah. So the last one, just, seeing God as the head of my business and learning to trust him. I'm going to tell you a story about an epic fail of mine. Here we go. So, let's start with the Bible verse. Bring it back to the Bible. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. I have learnt this the hard way. And I'll tell you why. So I was self-employed to start with, running my business. But quite a few people suggested to me that it would be a good idea to become a limited company. I won't bore you with too much of the details, but basically Michael had been made redundant, so his income was way less. He was doing some freelance work, but my income was a lot more than his for a time. And actually, it seemed like a wise and prudent thing to do to become a limited company, because then you can divide the dividends. I'm not very good with numbers and zeros and finance stuff, but anyway, basically, it was advisable to do this. So we arranged to go and see an accountant to set up this limited company, and I was praying about it, and I felt God say, wait. And I was just thinking, well, no, God, that's ridiculous. You know, it's totally logical, and, you know, I'm supposed to be wise and prudent, and, you know, that's all good God stuff, isn't it? You know, so anyway, ignored him. So we went ahead, and we set up a limited company, Carpenter Art and Film Limited, and I felt really good about that. Felt like a step forward for my business, so that was great. Carpenter Art and Film Limited was created on the 30th of October 2019. In December 2019, in Wuhan province, China, the COVID pandemic began. So I had gone from being self-employed to being the director of a small company. By March 2020, we were in lockdown and unable to run art classes physically. So I had to run them online. And as I said, most of my students are old ladies who are terrified of the internet. So my income massively dropped. But the government came along and helped out with a scheme giving 80% of people's self-employed income, but £0 and 0 pence to anyone who is a director of a limited company. So, you know, and that was, I mean, none of us saw that coming. So, yeah, it was something where I just was suddenly like, oh, God said, wait. And he is a much better business person than I am, because he knew what was about to happen. Thankfully, God is merciful and wonderful and helped us get through lockdown, and it was all fine. But, really learnt to trust him. So now, from now onwards as well, in my own business, where I'm actually in charge of making all the decisions, I am asking him first, and not just asking him, but listening to what he says, because that's really helpful. So
that is fantastic, Alison. Thank you, thank you. Okay. So if you want to pass the microphone back to Kwame. It's fantastic. So hopefully we've got like a flavour of these three in their different workplaces, how the Lord is doing things there in them and through them. So Kwame, just coming back to you, I wanted to talk about humility. So you've already, it's obvious from the way you speak about your workplace that humility is a big thing for you, as it is in the passage from Ephesians. But wondering, how can we embody humility whilst at the same time looking to advance in our workplace or business place? Because it seems like a conflict, but I just wonder what you think about that.
So, I don't know if any of you know, the airline engineering industry is a very hardcore industry in terms of a very laddish culture. So it's not easy, especially me as a person of colour, being in the environment. It's quite challenging. And, you know, engineers progress from very young age to a very high age. And I came in, obviously, straight out of university and joined the ranks. So obviously, you know, there you've got senior engineers who have multiple licenses, and you know, they see you as you're just straight out of university. So there's only certain things you can do. But basically, I had to take on what I would say the characteristics of Jesus Christ. Because of the environment, it's very challenging, not easy to adapt, and you can easily succumb to it. You can fall into the trap of becoming what everyone is, how they talk, how they behave. So I think when I came and joined, it was a bit of a breath of fresh air. So I decided to take on the characters of Jesus Christ and just remain humble. But at the same time, as you know, Jesus was humble, but he would stood up to anything that went against God, which I did. And yeah, it was nice to see that they embraced it. And I think because of that, there was a lot of respect for it in meetings, on the shop floor. And that's how I've remained all the way through. And I think because of that, the Lord has put me in a position where his light kind of shines through me, because I think you touched on it, is that people would be curious about, how do you do it? Especially when you come across challenges and you're calm about it, you don't panic, you don't threat, and they tend to look up to you. And also what I found recently is that people would approach you to talk to you about their everyday issues in life. And I think the Lord has put me in a position where he's using me to, I wouldn't say minister, but to help others and to shine his light, because in the workplace, we're the light and salt of the workplace. So yeah, that's...
Well, I would say Minister Kwame.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're describing is bringing the kingdom into vocation, into your vocation. People seeing Jesus through your choice to become like Christ in the workplace, even though it's been hard. Yeah. And I know we've talked a lot about those conversations you've had with colleagues, so I'm just seconding that. I know that Kwame has done that, and that is really encouraging to hear. I'd love to ask more questions to each of these, but we've got limited time. I want to really get much wisdom as we can. So Alex, Kwame has also touched on this, and you said this earlier. Ephesians 6 talks about respecting and listening to employers, but as you already said, like last week, we talked about our primary allegiance being to God. So if an employer is asking us to do something against the law of the land or the moral law of God, we don't really think Paul's expecting us to comply without nuance. And we also know that employers can sometimes dehumanize and treat employees unfairly, which is not something Jesus wants in the kingdom. So are there any red lines that you feel you just wouldn't cross if your employer told you to do so?
Yeah, I think it's quite nuanced in like a nice workplace. That everyone's very nice. I'd say that people are like morally good. You know, God's grace is not limited to Christians. There are amazing people at their job who aren't Christian and are just super talented and super generous with their time.
It's good to recognise that.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of red lines, lying, and again, it won't be in obvious ways, like lie to this company, but it might be like, don't say this, don't say that. And I think it's really important not to lie, especially if people know you're a Christian and they know you're willing to lie. That sort of kicks down a lot of your integrity. The second, I would say, is around integrity of your work in terms of, particularly in my job, whatever you do, like a lot of the fruits of your labor won't be harvested until many years down the line. Maybe you're not even there. So if I don't do a proper job on assessing a submission, approve the price, then like in 20, 30 years' time, customers are going to be paying a lot more than they should be. And that sounds like an obvious thing to like fight against, but when you're tired and it's a Thursday night and you're going to get a pat on the back when it's done, you've just got to have that integrity that it's not about that easy way out and making hard decisions. And again, if anything, I'm learning that from a lot of people who aren't Christian at work, and so that's not, but it's so important.
But your response is because you love the Lord, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. It's not a fear of man thing. It's not a fear of, this is going to come back to me. This is like God sees everything, and we'll get our crown in heaven for the stuff he doesn't see. And then the final one is a bit more rogue. There's a lot of it for good, like talks on equality, diversity, and inclusion at work. Super good conversations, super important conversations, but particularly on the issues of other faiths and on different like sexualities and beliefs in that realm. I think Paul says we're like called to live peacefully and quietly in the world, and so when those things are being talked about and discussed and they're the opposite of what the Bible teaches, I'm not there in the comment section going like, I disagree with that big time and here's X, Y, and Z, Y. But it's really helpful. I think it's in Acts, it says like Peter saw his opportunity and he addressed the crowd. And I think I have a heart in those areas to see opportunities and address the crowd, because I really believe like the Christian faith is really good news for purpose on earth and faith, and really good news for issues of sexuality and relationships. And so there's a time and a place for that, absolutely. Normally it's with peers and people I know better. But yeah, we're called to be salt and light in that, and not just kind of go, you believe that, that's great. I believe that, that's great. It's all great. It's, we have good news, and we really don't want to bury that. And it's got to come from a place of love. And if it's coming from condemnation, just keep your mouth shut. But if it comes from...
It's always wise, isn't it?
If it comes from love and knowing that the way they're advocating living is just self-destructive and just awful, then like it's really good news to speak into that and to lovingly challenge it, I suppose. Yeah.
Thanks, Alex. That's really important. Now, we're running out of time, but I'd just quickly like to ask Alison, and I was going to ask you about how you treat your employees in your business, but I think you spoke quite a bit about that in the previous question. So I'd just like to ask you, Ephesians talks about the Lord rewarding us for doing good in the workplace. How have you seen that in your vocation?
It's going to sound really cheesy, but I really feel for me that the reward is in doing the work. That maybe doesn't make sense, but I just love what I do, and it is such a rewarding thing to help people, not just discover their inner artist or whatever, but also to help people socially, relationally, and help people who need some encouragement and some love and that sort of thing. And also, I suppose, the reward is that my business has survived and I am now able to fully be making the decisions and therefore, receiving the rewards from that as well, not having to give a percentage to the franchise owner and things like that. So I'm now able to sort of receive the income fully and then make the decisions about how to spend that income. So financially rewarding as well as just, that inner reward of knowing you're doing God's work in a arty way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we're going to give some time to ministry, but Alex or Kwame, did you have any concluding comments on that as well?
I just want to jump on that question as well. I think definitely, like, in your job, think like the now and not yet of the kingdom. Think far beyond like what your job actually is and more the attitude you're doing it. Like, work is a pre-fall activity. So before sin entered the world, God asked people to steward the land. Think on that. It's not a punishment. I was going to say something. Something about work. Something about... What was the last question, really quickly?
It's about the rewards. The Lord rewarding us for doing good in the workplace. How have you seen that in your vocation?
I think it's just... it's the now and not yet. Like, we live in a fallen world. I am a sinner, and even the power of sin is broken. Its presence isn't gone, and the enemy is attacking. So stuff will go wrong in your work. Like, stuff will just muck up. There'll be bureaucracy. But there's also the kingdom breaking through. And it's a really short story. I was staying at a mate's house. We were both working at home. And he was like, Alex, this thing's been hanging over me for 2 weeks. It's not going to get sorted. Like, I just don't see a way through this unless this person helps. And I was like, well, God is sovereign. And I was kind of high on work at this point and what God can do in it. I was like, well, God is sovereign over your work. So we can pray over it and he'll intervene. Or he can do. Not really thinking he would. And then like 5 minutes later, he turned around to me like, yeah, that thing is sorted now, pretty much. Like, it's all done. I was like, oh, cool. I was like, so when you feel like your work is impossible, pray to God, ask other people to pray, and then just get on with it. Just like trust the body God has given you, trust that you're dependent on him. And then in the kingdom, we're all going to be working, and so steward well what you've got now, and God is going to give you more, not because of your own talents, but by being faithful. So steward it well. Yeah.
And the reward sometimes comes when the kingdom, when Jesus returns.
Yeah, just quickly saying something Tom preached on is to nourish. And by nourishing in the workplace, you will flourish. Don't be intimidated, because you can be sometimes in the workplace, especially those who've been there a lot longer or think they know everything. But stand your ground, and the Lord will work through you. And he's put us in a very privileged position. So make most of it.
That's fantastic. There's so much more I wanted to ask, but we were limited on time. Let's give these guys a clap, and thank you to Alison, Alex, and Kwame. And I'm going to invite Tom up. We'd love to do some ministry.